If you're in your first microeconomics class, I'm going to take a wild guess that your professor didn't explain the midpoint method properly. I'm a tutor, and this is what you actually got to know about it. And before we get started here, if you want to see where you stand for your final exam, go take my free practice exam in my bio. It's got 25 of the most common types of problems I see professors put on exams, and afterwards you'll get a unit-by-unit breakdown to show you how you did. All right, with that said, before we even dig into the midpoint method, I first want us to understand this baseline calculation or foundation for price elasticity. This is the formula. This is the core formula that we use to calculate it. We're assessing the percent change in quantity demanded or supplied by the percent change in price. In other words, how much does a 1% increase in price impact quantity? Let's zone in on this percent change here. Normally to calculate percent change, we'd go new minus old divided by old. This is the typical formula that we use in mathematics to calculate percent change. Where this changes with the midpoint method is that instead of dividing by old here, we divide by average. To essentially find percent change by comparing it to the average, to the midpoint, between the two coordinates that we're assessing between. This right here is the core difference of the midpoint method and why it's unique in solving for elasticity. If we were to use new minus old divided by old, our value would depend on which point we're starting from and going to. If we flip the new and old points, we'd get different elasticity values. So by us dividing by the average instead of just the old price or quantity, we're solving for elasticity with the midpoint method, and it doesn't matter which point we start at or end at. You're going to get the same elasticity value. So with that being said, the new way or the midpoint method way to solve for price elasticity is like this. We're going to take the new minus old quantity. New is 2, old is 1. Instead of dividing that by Q1, we're going to divide it by the average of Q. I'm just adding them together and then dividing by 2. This is how we solve for the percent change in quantity by taking the average. And for the denominator here, I'm going to do the same exact thing except with price. We're solving for the percent change in price by dividing by the average of price, not just the old price P1. This right here is the formula for midpoint method. So if you have two coordinates at point 1 and point 2, or the old point and new point, you're just going to plug in their Q and P values into this formula to solve for the price elasticity value. But most of the times, professors just throw this formula at you and expect you to understand what's going on. At its core, I want you to remember, you're basically still doing this same formula the old way. The only unique part is this denominator where we're dividing by the average. That's the midpoint method. All right, with that being said, if you like the way I explain microeconomics and just wish I could explain to you this entire class in one night, I can. Go check out my microeconomics cram kit in my bio. I've packed together basically everything I tutor you on the night before your exam to save your grade. So if you're super stressed for this exam and feel like you're genuinely about to fail, go click the link in my bio to learn more about the cram kit.